Hi, I am Heather Doyle Fraser. I am a coach and a creative development editor, and I'm here with Danielle Baird. She is a graphic designer, marketing specialist, and branding specialist. We're talking today in our webinar about the building blocks of a successful writing practice and how to put all of those pieces together. So, welcome.
Yes, hello everyone, welcome. If you are joining us live, there is a chat box that you can pop your questions into, and we will address those at the end. And if you're watching this on replay, welcome. So Heather, where should we dive in today? I know last time we talked a lot about your book blueprint and your outline, and I think we really talked about the importance of creating that roadmap and how that can really be a really great supportive tool for you as you're kind of navigating this jungle of writing your book. And so I think I'm excited today to talk about kind of what's next. So how do you really build your writing practice? How do you kind of put in those reps over and over and over again every day, to do your writing and to really craft, your first draft.
Mm-hmm. And I think, where we left it in our last webinar, we were just talking about how beautiful that outline can be for you and how it can kind of give you the license and permission then to be super creative because you have that structure for yourself. So you have that beautiful outline for yourself and you're feeling really confident and everything seems like, yes, I can do this. I have this plan. I'm totally ready and I'm going to do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and you sit down in front of your computer and then you, well, yeah, this looks good, but I don't know what, I don't know if I feel like writing today. I don't know. Oh my gosh, I gotta pay bills. Oh, look at what's sitting here. I should, yeah, I don't know if I have time to do this right now. Yes, a client just called. Maybe I should schedule them, this afternoon. I was gonna do the writing then. All of these things. Yeah, right?
Totally, because I think it's kind of like building a new habit of like, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow morning, and so when that alarm goes off, it's kind of like, oh, or I could just stay here in bed,
Right.
especially now with it being winter. Oh, where it's just nice and warm. Oh, it's so cozy. Or like you said, maybe you do make it to your desk that first morning or that first week, but then like Facebook notifications, email notifications, your phone's ringing, maybe your child or your partner needs you that morning.
Anything.
Yeah, I think like we could spend this whole hour talking about the interruptions.
Right? Um, so setting yourself up for success means at the very beginning, first of all, saying, okay, where am I going to write? I mean, that is a really super basic question, but it's an important one because if you are thinking, you know what, I'm going to do my writing in um, at this desk where I also do my bills and I do other things that maybe I do when I'm not feeling particularly creative. Um, I have found for myself and for my clients that having a dedicated writing space where you may do other creative things there, but you don't do other things that are not related to creation is really helpful because you're kind of training your brain. Okay, when I sit here and in this lovely space and surround yourself with things that make you feel like creating, that make you feel like you want to be writing. If it's a special figurine or a candle or artwork or even color or a pillow, whatever it is, set yourself up for your success by doing a really, really basic thing at the beginning, which is creating a space for yourself where you feel comfortable writing. where it doesn't feel like you're going to be distracted by other things.
And I think like with that too, when you're sitting down, I know I'm so guilty of this of like, okay, I'll sit down and then be like, oh, actually, I need a cup of coffee. And so I'll go make coffee. And then maybe I sit down and I start writing and I realize that like my feet are cold or I'm cold and I want a sweater. And so then I'm like, I'm ping ponging out
Mm-hmm.
of my space. And so what I started doing is sort of almost having like a pile. Um, because like, so I work in this office all day. When I do a lot of my writing, I actually do it in my kitchen. And so I would have a stack that I would keep on this desk that I could pick up and take with me into the kitchen and set up that space in the morning when my husband's still sleeping and in the house is quiet. Um, One thing I use is this little piggy timer, which
Yep.
is super fun, um, just to help keep me, focused for my time. And so I think, having some of those physical things all prepped and ready as like part of your ritual is really important too.
Yeah, I've had a couple of clients who, when I talked to them about this, they said, I don't really think that's going to make a difference. And then they tried it and they found that it really did make a difference because they had rid that space wherever it was of the normal distractions that they usually have. And so space, super important. Um, the next thing, and you alluded to this, Danielle, just a second ago, is so when are you going to write? Time of day. And for some people that could be in the morning. Some people think that they're not morning people and maybe it's in the evening. Maybe you have a chunk of time every afternoon. um, but being consistent with that time is, again, just kind of training your practice. um, when I was writing my book 40 weeks, I found I was trying to find different pockets of time. I would, schedule it out and I would, say I'm going to do this during this time. This is going to be my writing time. And if it was any time during the day other than the morning, something would always come up as being more important, as perceived as being more important, clients or, needs from family or whatever it was. So I realized after trying, for a little while, it took me a while to get there, even though I know all of this, um, because I really didn't feel like I was a morning person. So the idea of getting up when it's dark and doing something before anyone else is up for a prolonged period of time seemed like something I didn't want to do. But when it came up to the fact that if I don't give this a try, I've tried everything else. So I either have to change my way of doing things completely and just say it's a non-negotiable, or I try this way out. Maybe this will work. And so that's what I did. I got up very early and dedicated an hour to an hour and a half before everyone else got up every day to writing. And what I realized was I'm really creative at that time. I am really super creative, and I didn't think that I would be. It was kind of like this like creative cape went around me or something. I don't know, but I didn't have any distractions. I didn't have anything going on that was going to pull me away from it. And I found that it was a really good time for me to write. And so that was easy for me to stay focused and it was easy for me to crank out the work. So even if you have in the past thought, oh, I'm not a morning person, or oh, I don't think this will work, give it a try. You never know what's going to happen when you're really committed to something.
Yeah. And, I think I was going back through some old journals and realized that I have sort of been reading about habits and habit formation, and I geek out about this stuff. And I think I've been looking at it probably for the past 4 or 5 years, just because a lot of times, like, it feels like this elusive thing to build this new habit. And I think, like, part of the reason that early morning works is, in a lot of the research, they talk about having an anchor. And so it's kind of this if this then that
Mm-hmm.
formula.
Mm-hmm.
And so, your routine might be I wake up, I go to the bathroom, I take my dog out, I brew my tea, and I sit down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there's not a lot to like get in the way between waking up, which you're going to do every morning, and your next thing. And
And
so
go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I have run into, a lot of people do have morning rituals already, especially writers. What I've noticed is, and I had a morning ritual as well, doing a little meditation and reading devotional and things like that. Um, and so the idea of, well, I already have something there. I don't want to include something else. But knowing that if I want this to be successful, I have to try some different things. And even though I already have something in that space, I can still have that in that space. I just have to make a little more, I have to make more time there.
Exactly. And it's I think it might be BJ Fogg in his research. They talk about kind of building this habit chain.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if your morning devotional practice is already like you don't even think about it, you just sit down and you do it. That is the perfect anchor to then add on this next little piece in your sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you really are like, I cannot do the morning thing. I've already, my morning routine is already 2 hours long because I exercise and I do this and this. And you are going to try to put it in somewhere else in your day. I would recommend looking for some of those other really strong anchor habits. Like it could be you eat lunch every day. And so every day after lunch, you have this block. Or maybe it's, if you're an evening person, maybe it's after you put your child to bed, you sit down and do this. Or, just to kind of look at some of those other anchors throughout your day if you're not going to do it in the morning.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great way to look at it in terms of thinking of um, like the anchor, like you said, and having these pockets of time where you really have to be honest with yourself though about are there going to be things that are going to pull me? Are there going to be things that are going to be distractions at those different times? And because if there are, then you need to really think about how you're going to react to them when they happen. You have to have a plan in place for, okay, if this happens, what am I going to do?
And I think like you also touched on, it's not only looking at time, but also just looking at your energy and your creative energy. And so, in the morning, your stores were full and fresh, and you had all of this kind of creative juice that you could use on your writing. And um, that may or may not still be there at 9 o'clock at night. And it depends, I think, on each person. And so that's another thing to pay attention to kind of as you're looking at where you're going to slot in your writing practice, is just looking at your creative energy flows throughout the day.
I think in addition to that, so the other reason I think the morning works for a lot of people and worked for me too, is that there is something about the morning that is more there's more possibility in the morning. You don't know you have a plan for what's going to happen during the day, but really anything could happen. And I think that space of possibility and potential is such a great place to write from. And at the end of the day, it's not quite the same. That energy is a little bit different. So I always encourage people to try the morning, even if they haven't been able to make that a possibility in the past. Just give it a shot. And if it's not, that's fine too. Then we can, find another time that will work better. But that's for people who want to do their writing. They find that, doing writing every single day is what is going to help them. There's other people who write a little bit differently, and maybe they say, I do all my writing on the weekends, and I do it in large chunks of time. So if that's the case, you still are being consistent with that. So if you say, I do all my writing on the weekends, then every weekend you're doing your writing. It's not like when I feel like it on the weekends. I'm doing writing on the weekend, and I'm doing it for, 3 hours on Saturday and 3 hours on Sunday versus every day of the week for an hour. But it's still having a consistent practice.
And having, that container too, because I'm a little bit more of a batch worker. So like, yeah, doing like a big chunk of time. And my husband does improv. And so he had improv practice every Sunday. And sometimes it was here, sometimes it was at a friend's. But that was a block of, 3-4 hours that I knew he would be gone. And a lot of times that's when I would paint. And it just, I used that block every Sunday as my painting time here in the studio. And so I think that, yeah, getting as specific as you can with yourself. So not even just that I write on the weekends. It's I write every Saturday from 12 to 3. Like
Right.
it's non-negotiable.
Mm-hmm. It's the consistency of the practice that is the key, because that's how you build a pattern.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's not to say that you have to be perfect, like, because we're all human.
Oh yeah, there are things that come up that will impede the process. But if it's few and far between, your pattern and habit is set and you will continue with it. If it's things that happen every single day, then you're not building a pattern. You're
Yeah.
building a different kind of pattern, and it's not the one that you want.
And then that's just good data and feedback that, okay, it's not anything necessarily wrong with you and your character as a person. It's just
No.
like, okay, um, this time slot isn't working. So, you can just take that information and then shift what
Yes.
you're doing. And we were really, we talked a lot about kind of what we wanted to call this session. And we both really felt like the word practice, writing practice, is so important because there's a repetitiveness to it, but then there's also, some space where it may not be perfect every time, and that's okay. But every time, you're kind of working your system and fine tuning it just to be a little bit better than it was the last time.
Yeah, and I know, like, when I first started my writing practice in the morning, it wasn't for an hour or an hour and a half. When I first started, when I was, facing that alarm clock, and I was thinking, oh, okay, I'm just going to hit snooze one time, just once. And I did at the beginning. And so I didn't have that full amount of time that I had scheduled for myself, but I did do it every day, even if I was thinking, oh, I'm only going to get a half an hour in, I'm only going to get 20 minutes in. Well, I still did it for that 20 minutes. And then what happened was I started really looking forward to it because it was becoming successful and I was seeing what was happening with it and I wanted to do it. And so when the alarm went off, I was up right away and downstairs and writing. And then after a while, I was up before the alarm went off, didn't even go off. And I just, turned it off and went downstairs because I was looking forward to it.
Yeah, that momentum starts to take over and really, sweep you along into that practice. And so that is sometimes why my friend, the little piggy timer, and I might set it only for 15 minutes. And it's enough to trick my inner critic, my resistance, whatever you want to call it, that is like, oh, I don't want to do this today. And it's like, well, it's just for 15 minutes. And
well, and that brings up a good point too. Like, if 15 minutes feels too much, do it less. When you're starting a habit and creating a pattern, you want to know, I can do this totally. There's no question in my mind. Like, it's really hard to argue with something like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So when you're starting, set it just for that. I mean, like, set your expectation for that. And then the more that you do, the better it is.
Yeah. And so I think I mentioned him before, BJ Fogg, and it's Fogg. He even encourages you to chunk it down to like the teeniest, tiniest thing. And so, I mean, it really could be just like setting your alarm for 6 and just like waking up and like maybe putting your feet on the floor and being like, okay, I did this today. Um, and then it may slowly progress and graduate to where you just have to go and put your butt in the chair where you will be writing eventually, and you can be like, ding, I did that for today. And that seems like we're laughing and like it seems really silly, but it's about those small wins
Mhm.
of and just really slowly building that habit, instead of saying, I'm going to write for 2 hours at 4 in the morning from 4 to 6 a.m. And you might make it 3 days. And then that fourth day, you're like, oh, forget this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the classic workout analogy too. Like you jump in really hard and then all your muscles are hurting so much that you can't even move, and so you just give up. So we don't want that.
No.
We don't want that type of writing practice.
No. So I think, just to sort of recap on this segment before we kind of move on to the next part, is just to really experiment and to use some curiosity and play and creativity and designing the practice that works for you, and just to stick with it and keep experimenting until you find
What feels good.
exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when you do get yourself into that space, you have your space, you have your time, you're working, it feels good. So how do you start filling in that outline? Maybe you just have your big, like maybe you just have maybe those like big ideas in your outline right now. So the next step is to fill out each of those big ideas. And similar to building a habit and building a practice that's work, you just said, get curious, allow that curiosity to come forth. And that's the place where you want to be when you're filling in the outline and then starting to write. So asking yourself what really needs to be in, these big sections, but just focusing on one. Okay, what really needs to be in this? And kind of, you could do it by, bullets. You can do it by paragraphs. You can do it by sentences. You can do it whatever way feels good to you. And then once you have that, you can start writing in that area. And as you're writing, you're looking back and at your outline and saying, okay, yeah, I wanted to hit these 4 things. And you're writing, and then you're thinking, oh, but I had them in that order, but I don't feel it this way when I'm writing it. That's okay. That's just your guide. You don't have to be completely wedded to it, but you're writing. And then I would challenge you too to think about, as you're writing, what comes next? What feels like it's coming next right now? And so you're allowing that creativity to come forth, looking at your outline, allowing it to guide you, but not being so wedded to it that you miss things that might come up that are truly important to what you're doing.
And so, with that, when you're saying like you're kind of like feeling into it, I know that like we're both pretty intuitive people, and I think that a lot of writers are as well. And so like, do you kind of notice that intuition and that resistance maybe in your body as you're writing, and you're like, maybe this plan that I mapped out in the beginning just isn't quite where I want to go next?
I think that a lot of writers notice that, and sometimes that feels like a place to stop. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to stop. It might mean that you need to kind of just say, all right, well, if I'm feeling this much resistance here, what would feel easier? What would feel good if I wrote about it here? And kind of looking at that, and it may not stay there, but if that's what feels good at that moment, it's to keep your writing practice moving. I would say to write that. And then once other things continue to flow in, you can see, yes, this totally needs to be here. I was off the mark when I was doing that outline. This is gold right here. Or you can say, I think I just really needed to write that at that moment. Maybe it doesn't even need to go in the book. Sometimes what we're writing about is what we need to write about, but it's kind of like the backstory. So I have seen this a lot with my clients. So when you're writing a novel or a fictional piece, the author has a backstory for all the characters. The reader doesn't always see that. They don't know that so and so has these motivations all the time. The writer does, because that's how they're writing it. They know that this is going to be the next step because this is back in the past for this person. So the same thing happens when you're writing even a piece of nonfiction. There are pieces of your story, of your experience, of your knowledge even, that don't necessarily need to be in the book, but you need to write them down because they're part of your backstory. And so after you do that, you may find, hey, this goes somewhere else in the book, or this goes right here. And then sometimes, yeah, this doesn't go in this book at all, but I had to write it to get to the next place, and that's okay. Danielle, I think you're muted a little bit.
I was muted. So with that, does that mean that, sometimes maybe you really just needed to write that out to process it, to get it clear in your own mind, so that you can go on to telling the next piece of the story? Like, did I understand that part correctly?
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about writing something, and I've talked to enough people that I think that some people experience this as well. You're on a path. You're going down this road, and you get to either a crossroads, or you get to a place that feels fuzzy, and you think, I don't know where to go next. And so you have to create that path. And you may not be sharing that part of the path with all your readers later on, but in order to get to that next place in the evolution of the story or the piece that you're writing, you have to travel it to get to the next place.
I love that metaphor. And so it's like, you may have to take all 10,000 steps to get there. But when you're kind of guiding your reader with you, you might be able to hop over some of those sections.
Like a shortcut here and there.
Yeah. Yeah. Reminds me of like Chutes and Ladders or something like that. Yeah. And I know the other thing, like we've talked about before too, again, like with the outline and kind of looking at some resistance when you're sitting down to write that day. And I've seen it just on different pieces that I've worked on, that, sometimes where you're at and the thing that you're trying to express, for whatever reason, just is not coming forth right now. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I feel like, it needs to marinate in the back of my head for a little while longer. And it's really easy, I've noticed, for me to get frustrated and sort of then quit for the day.
Yeah. Nothing's working. I'm off.
And what I've learned from our conversations is that, yes, I can listen to those feelings, to that resistance that's coming up, that wherever I'm at in chapter 2 right now, just it's not happening today. And that also doesn't mean that I get to throw in the towel. And again, just kind of circling back to last week, we talked about, like, that's the beauty of the outline, because I can follow what's feeling good and feeling easy right now and jump ahead to sketch another piece in that might be ready to be written today.
Mm-hmm. Because at some point or another, you have to write the whole book. So if you're feeling inspired to write a part of the book that's later on, and you know that it's later on because you have this great outline, go ahead and do that right now. It's all moving towards the same goal.
Yeah, I'm still challenging this myth that has lived in my head for a long time that I've talked to you about a million times, where I just had this vision that these prolific writers sit down and they write the book from start to finish, and it's just perfect and beautiful, and it all just flows like magic.
Yeah, no. I always say to the people that I'm working with, um, when they've finished a certain part or whatever, what should I do next? Well, what feels easiest? Where do you want to write next? That's where you should write, because that's where you're going to be most inspired. If you want to do it, you will do it. And if it comes down and you're in the middle of it and you're like, yeah, I thought I wanted to write this part, but I need to think on it some more. I need to, do something else for a little bit. Then go write in another area. And if you get to a point where nothing is feeling like you want to write, then go back and start revising a little bit on what you've already written, because that you're going to need to do that too. It's all going to need to happen. And so when you are building that successful writing practice, the key is to continue, even sometimes when you don't feel like doing it. And you may discover, I didn't feel like writing, but I'm feeling fine about revising. And, you go back and you get to look at what you've written, and some parts you'll just say, I can't believe I wrote that. That was really good. And then you think, I really needed some time away. And now I see where I was having trouble here, and I can see why. I need to do some different things here. So just because you don't feel like writing something from scratch at that moment, maybe you need to be doing something else.
Yeah, and I know this came up recently too with one of our clients. He was asking about, when do I research?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we were talking with him about how sometimes on some of these off days can be a great day to go
Mm-hmm.
research. And so, you told him how if you're going along and you realize, oh, I think I need to like research or go look something up, you can just make a note to yourself and just keep going if you're in flow.
Mm-hmm.
And then, on these days where maybe you have writer's block, which the more we talk, I'm starting to realize doesn't really exist. That, it can be a great day to go back through your manuscript and see like, okay, where did I need to go and do some research, and, do that for
Mm-hmm.
today. And so you're still taking those steps forward. You're still honoring your practice and the time you've carved out. Even if it's not, working on the very next chapter of the book.
Even if it's not what you expected. So that, I mean, if the expectation is, I'm just sitting down to write, you're always going to meet I'm just sitting down to be working on my book. You're always going to meet that expectation. Whether you're researching, whether you're revising, whether you're writing, whether you're brainstorming about a new section and just taking some notes, that's all working on the book. That's all part of it. So I think that also sort of brings up a different idea about the expectation of what writing a book looks like. It's not always writing something new. It's a lot of different things. And sometimes it's research, sometimes it's brainstorming, sometimes it's writing, sometimes it's revising, sometimes it's editing. Sometimes it's reading what you've done and making sure that it flows and it feels good to you, and making sure you haven't missed anything.
I love that. And I think it reminds me, again, going back to the beginning, just talking about habit and goals. And something I've been really working to shift for myself is the idea of outcome goals versus process goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really tempting to say, I'm going to write X hundred or thousand words
Mm-hmm.
each day. And that can be really difficult. And
Yeah.
so I think, if you're looking at creating more of a process goal, like you were just saying, like, I'm going to dedicate working on my book, every day. And again, it doesn't have to be a whole hour. maybe today it's only 15 minutes, but you're going to have some kind of a touch point with that book and do some teeny tiny step to keep it moving forward. That I think that helps keep your energy and your motivation high because you're succeeding
Mhm.
every day and you're not measuring it up against this arbitrary number of words that you may or may not have hit that day.
Well, and when you talk about having this process goal, um, especially in writing a book, you're going to meet the outcome of writing the book if you are in the process every day. You will. If you do that every day, you will. And so that's one of those things where the process becomes the outcome.
Yeah, you're totally right. Because if every day you're sitting down, you will have forward progress, and those little steps are going to add up, and you will finish the book. Um, but I've just noticed for myself that sometimes when I set these big, specific kind of intermediary process goals of a word count or even being too ambitious with the amount of time that I'm going to spend.
Mhm.
And so if I only wrote for 50 minutes instead of 60, it feels like I failed. If I'm not coming at it, with the right mindset.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think that being flexible with that is a key too, because there are some days that even with your best effort, sometimes things come up and look different. Sometimes the alarm doesn't go off. Sometimes whatever comes up. Sometimes you realize, oh, something takes precedence. And so, but if you just say, I'm working on my book every day, and you dedicate some amount of time, then you'll always be moving forward. And you will be surprised at how many times you go above what you thought you were going to, because you are in the flow, because you are enjoying it, because you are having success. And so you want to keep going. There were lots of times when I was kind of inching more into like, because I wrote in the morning before my daughter and my husband got up, I could hear them getting up upstairs and I'm still writing. I'm like, I'm just going to go a little bit more, even though, I mean, I knew that my time was dwindling, and normally I might be, like getting things going for the morning routine or whatever. But I was feeling so great that I just kept going a little bit more. And that happens a lot once you start a practice.
Absolutely. And then I think the other thing too, not to underestimate, is by having that touch point, in the morning where you're writing or looking at your outline or doing some research, you're kind of in it in some way. I notice for me then throughout the day, it's always kind of living in the back of my head. So when I'm walking my dog or taking a shower or standing in line at the grocery store, my brain is still working on those puzzle pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, that little touch point in the morning, I think, helps it stay top of mind and fresh as a puzzle for my brain to work on throughout the rest of the day.
I totally agree. And I also think it's almost like setting an intention for your day of, being in this writing space. When you start your day off that way, you're kind of your intention is that I'm sort of writing throughout the day, even if I'm not physically writing, because just exactly like you said, you're writing in your head almost, or you're processing in your head, so that when you come back the next day, you're even more ready. So it's a win-win.
It is like, I think it's it's that inertia. Like I think creation begets more creation. And and I think the inverse is true too. Like I know that when I, might fall off the wagon with my habit, and the more days that creep by that I haven't touched the project, it makes it really hard to kind of get back in.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like the exercise analogy again. Same thing. Um, And not to say like everybody needs a break now and then. I mean, breaks are okay, but it's allowing yourself a little bit of rest and then knowing this is not like a 4 week break. It's like, I need a break today. This day, I need a break. And then tomorrow I'm back at it.
Yeah, I think, it's the way I'm hearing you describe it, it's as this active choice where you're really looking at, okay, what is going to really truly serve me and this book right
Mm-hmm.
now? And it might be a day off, and it might be sleeping in, and it could be taking an adventure, out in your town or your city. Or maybe you have a family vacation planned and you're like, you know what? I'm not writing for
Right.
this week.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's totally okay. And some of the stuff that I read, I think this may have been in Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin,
Mm-hmm.
which might be my new favorite habits book. She talked about making some of these decisions ahead of time, and how if you're going to take a break, try to plan for it when you can. And so it is a choice and not just ugh, I don't feel like it today.
Right. I mean, that is actually right on. That's key. I mean, because then you're saying you're not, here's what it is. If when you say I don't feel like it today, you're saying that I can't write because I don't feel like it. And when you have a practice, you sit down and you do the practice. You do the practice every day, whether you feel like it or not, because it's a practice. So when you make a choice, I'm not doing it today because I need a break. That's not saying I don't feel like it. That's just saying I'm choosing not to do it today. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, that word choice, I am choosing. Um, there's just there's a huge energetic shift around it. And I think it also just sort of clears your brain from that, well, am I doing it later? Am I going to do it after lunch? Maybe I can still, like, there's this chatter that happens where I think, if there's like a choice and a decision of today I'm taking the day off, then it's like, check, and all that brain space gets cleared.
Yep. And then there's no expectation that you're not meeting. You're, like you're you've taken out the all of that unnecessary kind of ruminating that you might do.
Yes. Yes.
So you said something just a second ago that I want to kind of circle back to about kind of like taking an excursion,
Yeah.
away from things. And sometimes when we're feeling stuck, that is a really good thing to do, like a really good way to kind of jumpstart that sort of inspiration feeling. But it doesn't have to be an excursion outside of things. It can be an excursion even like in your writing space. But I've noticed that a lot of times when we're feeling stuck on things, if you kind of flip things around, shift things a bit, and give your senses a little bit of a jolt, then it often kind of reboots the system, sort of. So I've I've done this. I've talked to lots of clients about doing this. Whether it's maybe you need to move your body a little bit, and so you can feel kind of just the energy in your body. Whether it's dancing, walking, some kind of exercise, Tai Chi, like Qigong, like all different kinds of things. Doing something like that, or even using part of like if you used part of your morning ritual to help you kind of um, excite your senses a little bit. So when I make coffee in the morning, one of the things that I do is I smell the coffee grounds before I put them in my little filter. And that's kind of like ooh, okay, yeah, this is gonna be good, like, but it's kind of like it's kind of getting all in my senses, and I'm experiencing that on multiple levels. So when I'm drinking it, I'm experiencing it one way, but when I smell it, I'm experiencing it another way. And um, that if you have, a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something hot, like hot water with lemon, lemon is a great thing because it's so intense in its flavor. So if you have a cup of hot water with lemon and you normally have coffee, that's going to kind of change things a little bit for you. And these all sound like really simple things, but they create an impact on your writing practice because they're a little bit different, but they're still in that space where you're going to be writing. So you don't even have to leave in order to create an excursion for yourself, if we're using that word broadly.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll offer another exercise too. It's this idea about, keeping your pen moving. I know a lot of us, I think, go directly digital, and you're working on your laptop. But maybe try using a pen and piece of paper, like either just to jot notes to yourself, or if you're just really like, I just can't even today. A great tool for me has just been these abstract doodles, and you can use a piece of junk mail and whatever pen, pencil, marker, anything goes. And just kind of let your pen travel over the paper. And so, there's nothing like sophisticated about this. And I literally start with a squiggle. So let's see if I can hold this up and do it at the same time. So just, that's how I start. So anybody can do this.
Right.
And so then from there, I just take a look and go, all right, well, where might I want to do something? And so like this little tail, like, is catching my eye. Right. So I might start there and just make these like little doodads. And so in some ways, this, when I work on these, it reminds me of like kind of starting with your book outline, because now I can jump anywhere on this page. I don't have to keep going over there. I might come down here and go, I'm going to add some lines in there. And you can hop all around, and you might do this for 30 seconds and then go, oh, I'm good. And be able to hop right back into where you were writing. But I keep these little pads on my desk. And when a page on my computer takes forever to load and I'm getting frustrated, or if I'm on hold, I'm always just kind of doodling. And it's amazing just like how it can free your brain up to, synthesize and put some of those pieces together that you've been maybe wrestling with.
Well, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with creativity begets creativity. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing. It will spark something else. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And like, this is how they all start, which is not fancy. And, as you kind of keep going and fill it in, like, they can look kind of fun and cool by the end. But, it's really just one little line or shape at a time, which is just how you're writing your book, one word at a time.
Yep. One word at a time, one sentence at a time. And, and so I think that this kind of brings up something else for me, in terms of when you're writing and you feel like, I know where I want to go next, but I don't know how to make that jump. I don't know how to transition into that. Sometimes you don't need a paragraph or a section to transition. Sometimes you need a heading. Sometimes you need like a subheading that will kind of be the guiding signpost for your reader. You don't always have to have a big, long transition into something else. Sometimes the reason you can't figure it out is because it's really not going to work that well. And sometimes the best thing to do is to create a little subhead. And so that is your guidepost for your reader rather than this long transition that you're trying to craft.
And so I feel like this has been coming up in a lot of our conversations lately, where there's also sort of a shortcut way to do this if you can't think of the perfect subhead right now. And you can insert some dashes or some stars or just something to mark the break. But at some point, when you're doing your revisions and going back through, taking the time to write those little subheads, even though it might be a little bit challenging to you as a writer, is going to serve your reader so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the things, and I know sometimes when I've talked with people about crafting subheads, and this applies to all forms of writing. And so it's in your book, it is on a blog post. If you write really long Facebook posts, this can serve you too. And subheads really are a way to help your reader skim. And so hopefully
organize the information in their brain. Yep.
Yeah. And hopefully like they're going to read your work multiple times. And I think we've all had the experience of being like, oh, I loved that part or that quote. Where was it?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going back through this book and it's just a sea of text. And you're like, oh, where was it? Why didn't I put a little star?
Yeah.
And so those subheads really help your reader go back and re-experience your work and to find your brilliance again and again.
Mm-hmm. And also, let's say you are writing something that's kind of an essay length something, and if someone wants to quickly know, like, what is this going to be covering, they can look at those stuff. Oh, I can see where this is going. Like I can get a feel for it even before. It's like a pre-reading exercise almost, and they can even take a look at it and be like, oh yeah. Or if they want to kind of look back at it after they've read it, oh yeah, that was really good, I love that part. Like it's just a way to help them chunk information and to help you chunk information both. It's really an excellent tool.
Yeah, I know that you talked about like, in the kind of the outline into first draft phase that like, you can kind of go in and you have these different levels of your map.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it might be like, this is a map of Earth, is your book. And then you're like, okay, I'm in North America. I'm in the United States. I'm in California. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm in the north side of Los Angeles. And, you just kind of keep drilling down and having these little signposts for your reader and for yourself as you're going along.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're writing and then you realize, oh, wait, I'm not talking about the north side of Los Angeles right here, and that's the section I'm in. Maybe I shouldn't be writing it right here. Maybe this goes someplace else.
Yes. And if like, I think that, kind of understanding this can be a little bit tricky. And so, if you're not used to writing in this way, I think a great place to start is by, to kind of go over to Barnes and Noble or your CVS or someplace that has a magazine rack,
Mm-hmm.
and flip through magazines and just kind of look at the headline and then look through the subheads and just kind of start to get a feel for how journalists use it as a tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this works particularly well in like nonfiction books. This works really well in nonfiction books.
Yeah.
And I bet people, if you looked at your bookshelf, you would find it happening more often than you think it does. It just does. I mean, especially in nonfiction books.
Well, I think we've kind of covered everything we meant to in
Yep.
Our hour here together. So we talked about how to set yourself up for success with your writing practice. We talked about a few different ways that you can take your outline to the next level and really work on filling in your first draft of your book. We talked about revising and how you can kind of do that as you're going along on days that you're stuck. We talked about using some of that intuition and how you're feeling that day to guide what you are going to work on next for that day.
And
And
some
a
tips
lot.
about getting unstuck when you do feel that way. Yep.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot, and I hope that you enjoyed this next installment of our webinar series. Heather and I are also the co-creators of a new program called the Writers Workshop. And if you enjoyed these webinars, you may also enjoy that program. And you can learn more about it at www.writersworkshophd.com. HD like Heather and Danielle. Heather, you're usually really good about summarizing the program, so I'm gonna
You're doing
toss
a
this.
great job. But, so it's a 7-month program, and it is for writers and creators who are working on their books. And it is a community where we will be having group calls twice a month. One of the calls would be informational teaching content, such as what you're experiencing in these webinars, with some coaching involved. And the other will be a workshop call where we will be taking the pieces of all the people in the group and workshopping them together. So it's a super powerful tool to help you to enhance your manuscript. Additionally, you have one-on-one sessions with me on the creative development and editorial piece, as well as coaching. You have consulting with Danielle on the marketing strategy, branding platform, and design of your book. There are so many amazing perks to this program, and I would really encourage you to check it out if this sounds interesting to you. We're also running a special cost right now. Or it's an early bird price, and we are throwing in a couple of additional one-on-one sessions with us. So that goes on till the end of the month, and then the price goes up to its final cost.
So, and if you, take a look at the program and you have questions or you're not sure if this maybe is the best fit for where you are right now in your process, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to have a conversation with you. And, in those conversations, it's not a 1-hour sales pitch. We really want to hear from you about your book, where you're at with your outline. And so you'll really get to experience kind of what the program would feel like. And no matter what, you'll walk away having learned something, and, we'll be kind of one step closer in your book creation process.
And we also, not only are we doing this group project program, we also work together with one-on-one clients too. So if you are working on a book but feel that the group program isn't for you, we also have other solutions.
Yeah, so please feel free to get in touch with us. Again, the website is www.writers, which is plural, writersworkshophd.com. I'm Danielle Baird, and I'm here with Heather Doyle Fraser. And thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time. Bye.